Hello and welcome back to Rock Records Reviewed. My name's Adam, and this week we're finally going to take a look at the three studio albums recorded by rock legend Jimi Hendrix and his band The Experience. Jimi Hendrix was born in Seattle in 1942. In 1961, he enlisted in the army but was discharged a year later. He went on to join the Isley Brothers backing band with Little Richard, from whom apparently he learned an awful lot of his flamboyant stagecraft, before moving on to Curtis Knight and the Squires, and then moving to England in 1966, where he was discovered by Chas Chandler, the bassist in The Animals, who offered to manage him and put together The Experience for him, which of course was Noel Redding on bass and Mitch Mitchell on drums. Jimmy made 3 studio albums in his short life, and also made some iconic concert performances at Woodstock, Monterey and the Isle of Wight, amongst many others, before his accidental death in London in 1970. Hendrix kind of arrived like an atomic bomb on the London music scene, and he made an immediate impact. It's said that Eric Clapton went into his dressing room and wept tears of despair on realising there was nowhere left for him to explore on the guitar, having just seen Jimmy play. Much like Alexander the Great weeping rivers of tears when he realised there were no more lands left for him to conquer. And if you're still watching after that ludicrous comparison, then listen on, because there's plenty more where that nonsense came from. Hendrix is widely regarded, I think, as the greatest electric guitar player of all time. I don't think that's under any dispute that he is regarded as such. He's certainly right up there, and he could also claim to be amongst the most influential. Rock music, I think, would have evolved far slower without him, and as a result could possibly have been very different. His playing is so unique that he even has a guitar chord named after him, which is it's an E7 sharp /9, which is known as the Hendrix chord. Do you know what? I'm going to play it for you right now. Hold on. This is a first, isn't it? So the Hendrix chord sounds like this. So, imagine that cranked up through a Marshall at full volume. But that chord is known by all us guitar players as the Hendrix chord. I hope his estate's not watching, because they might claim some royalties for that. But Hendrix's legacy lives on musically all over films and radio and culturally in iconic Hendrix imagery, which I think encapsulates kind of a multitude of philosophies, not just innovation and excitement and danger and experimentation and sexuality, but also peace and love and humility and a gentleness in a very laid-back kind of hippie wisdom that he had off stage. Where, I mean, everybody who knew him away from the stage said he was a very, very gentle, quiet man. Anyway, let's crack on, because we've only got 3 albums to look at here. And at number 3, I'm going to put from 1967, his second album, Axis Boulders Love. This came out only 7 months after the debut album, and it was recorded over a couple of stints at Olympic Studios in London. And it's most famous for Little Wing, which is, of course, an absolute Hendrix classic, a beautiful soft rock ballad, really. And also Spanish Castle Magic, which is another song that kind of makes the great Hendrix canon of songs. But I think the rest of the album hasn't necessarily become that well known. One of the reasons for that is because he played very, very little of it live. Hendrix was a very, very fast learner in the studio, and this was, by the time he was doing this second album, he was trying a lot of experimentation musically and instrumentally and everything, and I think a lot of the songs were actually quite difficult for him and the band to translate onto the stage. The album was delayed because Jimmy left the master tapes in the back of a London taxi cab, but there was a lot of painstaking recording going on when Jimmy was recording this album. And there was a rift growing between him and Chas Chandler because he was so finicky with all the things he was learning so quickly, that he was doing lots and lots of retakes and re-recordings and things. And I think the band were getting a bit tired of his perfectionism. You've got Noel Redding chips in with She Is So Fine on here, and the whole feel is lighter, it's jazzier, it's a little bit trippier than the debut album. I think a lot of the studio experimentation might be to the detriment of the actual songs. It just doesn't have the cohesion for me that the first album has. Now, look, don't get me wrong. This is still a great album. There's no doubt about that. But is it as enjoyable as their debut album? I think that probably depends on how stoned you are. It made top 10 in the UK and the USA, and it was 92 on Rolling Stone's greatest albums of all time. Hendrix was well known to have really hated the album cover, by the way. And a couple of interesting guest appearances. You've got Graham Nash and Roy Wood. It's their footsteps that you can hear over You Got Me Floating. At number 2, I am going to put their final album together from 1968, Electric Ladyland. Now, as I was saying, Hendrix was really developing in the studio. He got to grips very, very quickly with everything. And this was completely produced by Jimmy, this album. And it's a double album. It was the only full stereo album they made as well. Recording sessions were really slow for this one because Noel Redding was distracted by his own band by this point, Fat Mattress. He and Jimmy were drifting apart. So Jimmy does play a lot of bass on this album, but also because the album was being visited morning, noon and night by all kinds of hangers-on and groupies. It sounds great, doesn't it? But I think it slowed things down. I don't know how anyone got any work done, frankly. But they did eventually. And this album is chock full of Jimi Hendrix classics. Crosstown Traffic, Voodoo Child, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, Gypsy Eyes, and of course the incendiary cover version of Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. But there is a lot of trippy, self-indulgent stuff on here, and it breaks my heart to say it. But to this day, I still sometimes feel like getting up and just moving the needle forward every now and then. I know that's absolute sacrilege, but my shows are nothing if not honest. There is a lot in this album. I mean, it's quite a feast of music, and almost all of it hits the bullseye, but it does have the double album curse, and not necessarily because the songs aren't good. They're all really good, but some of them just go on a little bit, just in that kind of trippy, jammy sort of way. It was a huge success. It was their most commercially successful album, got to number 1 in the States, number 6 in the UK, and All Along the Watchtower ended up being their most successful single. Rolling Stone, 53 on Rolling Stone's greatest albums of all time. And again, a couple of really good guest appearances from Steve Winwood, who plays the organ. I'm sure most of you know, plays the organ on Voodoo Child. And none other than Brian Jones, who is playing percussion on All Along the Watchtower. Buddy Miles appears on drums on a couple of songs on here. And that was a kind of sign of things to come because, of course, after this album, Jimmy put together the band of... He disbanded the Experience and put together the Band of Gypsies with Buddy Miles and Billy Cox. And his next album after this was actually a live album with the Band of Gypsies. But my number 1, Jimi Hendrix and the Experience. Jimi Hendrix and the Experience? No one's ever said that, have they? My number 1 Jimi Hendrix Experience album is... their debut album, Are You Experienced? Now, we've covered this album a lot in the debut albums show, and it was actually my number 1 debut album of all time. So if you've seen that show, you'll know how much I think of this record. It was released in I think it was May 1967. It came out just before the height of flower power and the summer of love in London. So it must have been a very, very exciting time. And this album, of course, is a crucial factor in just adding to that really rich, dense, exciting potpourri that must have been London at that time. he had already released 3 brilliant singles: "Purple Haze," "Hey Joe," and oh my God, I'm getting old, aren't I? I can't remember. "Purple Haze," "Hey Joe," and not "Burning in the Midnight Lamp." "Wind Cries Mary." Oh God, I'm so sorry. I mean, it's just, and they're all produced by Chaz Chandler and engineered by the legendary Eddie Kramer. And Jimmy had got a deal with Track Records, which was owned by Keith Lamb and Chris Stamp, who were managing The Who. But none of those 3 songs ended up on the original pressing of Are You Experienced? It just came out, but it still had some great songs on it. You got "Foxy Lady," "Red House," "Fire," "Are You Experienced" itself, and it was an album that was encompassing rock and blues and soul and jazz and psychedelia and heavy rock. It was universally acclaimed on its release. And I think, so much of that was Jimmy's explosiveness and flamboyant showmanship, the likes of which people had never seen before. But also, there's great subtlety and intricacy and a real musicality in Jimmy's playing that went far beyond what most of the sort of the great standard blues players were doing at the time with their phrasings and their approach. This album really is a high watermark in the history of rock music. But funnily enough, it never got to number 1. It got to number 2 in the UK, spent 70 weeks on the chart in the USA, and was 30th in Rolling Stone's greatest albums of all time. And actually 4 of the songs on this album made their top 500 songs of all time. And Mojo Magazine called it the greatest guitar album of all time. You can now get the USA version did have "Wind Cries Mary," "Hey Joe," and "Purple Haze" on it. And now you can get that album in the UK, of course, as well, now on CD and as a double vinyl album. And I do recommend that that's the one you get, because there's obviously 3 brilliant singles when you can remember their names. And it just adds to, it makes an already fantastic, seminal, hugely influential album even better. In fact, the album's so seminal that there's even a copy of it in the Library of Congress in the States. Where did Hendrix go after these 3 albums? Well, like I said, he put together the band of Gypsies. He was recording a lot before his death, and a lot of those recordings came out on a couple of albums that were released after he died. The best 2, I think, being "Freedom," which is a "Cry of Love," which is a really great album. Actually, it's got "Freedom" on it and "Angel," to Hendrix standards. And also, I liked "War Heroes" a lot. I thought that was pretty good. Both of those now you can't buy, because all of that stuff he recorded just before he died but never released has all been sort of chopped up and changed and re-released in all kinds of different formats. Although another really good record worth checking out is Jimi Hendrix the Blues album, which has got some really great stuff on it as well. After long legal battles as to who owns the Hendrix estate and the music, there are now a bewildering number of different formats of his albums now. So I really do think that if you're looking to get into Hendrix, just get the 3 albums, because they're all brilliant. They all have got some incredible music on them. And then maybe a couple of the live albums, the good live albums, which you can get now. You can get Jimmy Plays Monterey, Jimmy with the Isle of Wight, with the band of Gypsies, and they've all got something going for them. But there are also some pretty dodgy bootlegs out there that you might want to steer clear of. But look, there you go. That sort of pretty brief, but pretty potent, I think. Being Jimi Hendrix. But let me know what you think. Am I wrong about Jimmy and just the sort of the song? Some of the songs being slightly too long on Electric Ladyland. I know a lot of people do rate that as his best album. If you disagree with me, then do say so below, and tell me where you rate all the Hendrix albums. And if you have a particularly a particular favourite that was released after he died, then let us know as well, so we can discuss that one too. But so that's it for this week. Nice to be back on the classic rock and get the t-shirts out again. But I will see you again very soon for another Rock Records Reviewed. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.